Hi, my name is Alex Sneed here at RJI CPAs. I shoot this video to talk about the ERC and the most recent developments that have happened at the end of 2023 and into 2024. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the ERC and just a quick refresher on what it is. I'll be talking about the supply chain guidance that came out from the IRS a couple months ago. We'll talk about the moratorium, the processing moratorium that the IRS implemented in September. And then we'll talk about the voluntary disclosure program and the withdrawal program that the IRS implemented in Q4 of 2023. And then finally, I'll end with some of my closing thoughts. So the ERC has three major updates and one pending update. I didn't create a discussion slide about the pending legislation that's currently at the Senate right now because it's not law, but I will mention and talk about it briefly. So what is the ERC? Just as a quick refresher, it's a refundable payroll tax credit that is applicable for years 2020 and 2021. The maximum credit is $26,000 per employee, as you can see in the slides. And the filing for these ends April 15, 2024 and 2025 for 2020 and 2020 respectively, asterisks. So there's actually pending legislation that's going to change this filing deadline if it passes. That bill is currently sitting with the Senate. It was passed by the House with bipartisan support, and it's changing some of the laws regarding the ERC. I'm not going to go into that until it passes, and then maybe I'll shoot another video that talks about the changes. But I do want to mention it because, yeah, right now, as the law is written, the due date's April 15th. 2024 and 2025, but that's subject to change even as I'm shooting this video. So I wanted to acknowledge that. So legislation guidance that happened a couple months ago in regards to partial government shutdown and for essential businesses was the supply chain disruption. And the IRS basically talked about there was no guidance for the supply chain disruption, and a lot of filers were just taking that to mean, oh, well, if I had any supply chain disruption, I qualify, I'm eligible for the ERC. The IRS came out with more specific guidance, as seen in the slides here, which means a foreign or domestic government order, and it impacted your supplier's capacity to deliver essential goods to your business, and you could not find another supplier, and this disruption caused a demonstrable operational consequence due to your inability to acquire essential goods. Notice I said and, so all four of these conditions need to be met for you to have a supply chain disruption. The IRS further elaborated in the regulations that the taxpayers can cite their supplier as having a shutdown by government order, but they can't merely have their supplier say they were shut down. Like, they need to have their supplier have a government order stating their supplier was shut down. You can't cite news sources and social media as your support for supply chain. You know, there was a lot of that going on in 2021 and 2020. You remember, especially here in California, with the Long Beach port, there was a lot of that. And then alternative suppliers at higher prices. If you did have alternatives, they were just higher prices and the cost of your goods went up. That does not mean you had a supply chain disruption. And finally, if you're open, but you have limited stock, but you had to raise your prices like grocery stores or, home improvement stores or whatever, that doesn't mean you had supply chain disruption, even if you had low stock, low inventory. Supply chain disruption is really for if it was a critical, essential part of your business for the manufacturing process or something, and you could not get that supply, your business was impacted. That's what I think the IRS is. Next, we're going to move on to the processing moratorium. So the IRS implemented a processing moratorium on 9/14/23. So this means that they stopped all processing of ERC claims that were submitted postmarked after 9/14/23. The range, they said, was from 9/14/23 until at least to 12/31/23. Well, as I shoot this video in February, the moratorium has not officially been released or lifted by the IRS. The IRS has had no communication because we're kind of waiting for that pending legislation. There's a lot of things that are kind of up in the air. And so as a practitioner, the IRS has never actually told us that the moratorium is listed. That's why they use language until at least 12/31. So now, past that date, we are sitting here, and the moratorium, as far as I know, is still in place. We've had clients call the IRS. We've called the IRS, and they did say that they are halting processing, even though they are still receiving. So what this means is if you had a claim or you submitted a claim in January or in January or so, and you've still submitted it, then it should have still been received and awaiting processing for the IRS. The due date change due to this pending legislation would have changed the due date to the end of January 31st, 2024, which, again, the law hasn't passed, but that's what's written. And that means that the deadline, the moratorium, effectively goes until 1/31, and that anything filed afterwards is not going to be processed. We don't know, dates can change on the final law, but that's how things are looking at this moment. This moratorium was implemented to combat the surge of fraudulent claims. So towards the end of 2023, there was a huge surge of millions of fraudulent claims to the IRS trying to claim the credit. So the IRS put the brakes on, stopped all processing, and took the time to develop initiatives for the victims. So one of those initiatives was the credit withdrawal process. So if you were a victim or you were aggressively marketed to by nefarious filers, and they said you qualified, they didn't do any of their processing or any of their homework, and they just filed a claim for you. And you're kind of reading this, and you talk to another advisor, maybe a CPA, got a second opinion, and realize, hey, maybe I don't qualify. So the first initiative was the IRS allows you to withdraw your claim. So they created a process back in October that allows you to withdraw your submission of your claim and avoid future repayment of the credit, penalties, and interest. This process is not eligible for claims that were already paid or checks that were cashed. So basically, this is only for if you filed recently and you haven't got your checks and you kind of want to withdraw it, you can do that. However, if your claims were paid, let's say you filed earlier in 21 or even in 20 and you had the money and you're still having this, you got the second opinion, or you realize that maybe you aren't eligible, the IRS created the ERTC voluntary disclosure program right around the holidays, December 26th or so. They released it, or 22nd, I think. And that's available until March 22nd, 2024. So if you feel like you filed a claim that you were not eligible for, you can actually pay back the money and you get to keep 20% of it tax-free. Part of the agreement is you work with the IRS, you tell them who advised you on filing the claim, you promise to work with them if they go into audit and that kind of thing. So, and the voluntary disclosure program is a neat tool that the IRS is allowing people to file. And if you are a victim of over-aggressive marketing, this might be an avenue for you to get back the money, avoid penalties and interest, and be able to even keep 20% of it tax-free. I think it's a pretty generous offering by the IRS. So that brings me to my final thoughts here. And the ERC is very facts and circumstances driven. The biggest takeaway in practicing in this area is for taxpayers and practitioners when they're filing is beware of shaky eligibility claims. It seems like almost everybody can file the numbers and file the claims and get the credit amount. But what I've seen in going through audits and doing this in practice is establishing your eligibility on a firm foundation is really important. And a lot of practitioners are just not doing that, especially those that are not. So there's very high audit risk in this area, and I think the IRS is gearing up for that. The pending legislation also is changing the audit window for all ERC claims to be 6 years. So there's a lot geared towards clawing this money back. The IRS, Congress, everybody has their eyes on going after the nefarious filers. And finally, I think this is very great advice, but you need to consult a trusted advisor. Even if you filed for a claim and you feel like now after a year or two, you feel like maybe you weren't eligible or the person that you used to file your claim wasn't as reputable as you thought, you can consult a trusted advisor. There's paths forward, there's avenues to pay the money back, the voluntary disclosure program, et cetera, et cetera. There's ways to avoid future penalties and interest. So I think those are things to be very cognizant of going into the future. The ERC is closing up, it looks like, as far as new claims, but it's going to be around for audits and a lot of investigation in the following years. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me or Fernando Jimenez here at RJI CPAs. I'll see you on the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.